Dragon Ball. The Strongest Training. Chapter 21. It has been 2 days since the last high-intensity training. Clint was holding the Dragon Ball radar at this time. The radar made beeping sounds and bright spots were flashing on the radar's grid. There were 7 bright spots in total. This was at this moment the location of Dragon Ball. Clint has put the gravity training room into the transformation capsule and is ready to go. Krillin said something expectantly. Clint looked at the Dragon Ball radar. From the radar, he could see that the Dragon Balls were scattered all over the world. The one closest to him was thousands of kilometers away. What's the direction? Well, isn't this the direction of Wukong's home? Wukong seems to have a 4-star planet. Okay, let's go to this one last and look for the remaining 6 stars first. Except for the one in Wukong's house now, the one closest to him is Marsta. Marsta is equivalent to the vicinity of Alaska on the Earth in the previous life. It belongs to the extreme north, covered with ice and snow all year round, and sparsely populated. It's so cold, Clint couldn't help complaining as he looked at the snow cellar and the icy sky. Snowflakes were falling in the sky. The temperature here is definitely over 100 degrees below zero. What kind of evil is this? Clint is a typical person who is afraid of cold but not hot. Clint watched the instructions of the Dragon Ball radar slowly flying in the snow. Dee beep, the radar showed that it was nearby, and all Clint saw was white snow. The snow was so thick that the Dragon Balls must be under the snow. Clint raised his own aura, and in an instant, a circle was formed with Clint as the center. With a phoenix eye, the snow was blown all over the sky. Clint looked under the snow and couldn't help but burst into tears. This ice has been frozen for at least 10 years. Clint had no choice but to open a small opening in the ice. Clint took off his clothes and prepared to go into the water. Clint tested the temperature of the water. It was biting and cold to the bone. Clint released his breath to wrap himself up. This is the way of martial arts masters. Clint swam downstream. The depth under the ice layer was only about 100 meters. The ice water was purely natural. It was so transparent that one could not tell the color of the water. After a while, Clint reached the bottom, and the sun's rays penetrated through it. After passing through the ice and being refracted by the water, the Dragon Ball embedded in the frozen soil gave off a dazzling flash. Clint quickly swam over and got closer. He saw 5 stars twinkling in the Dragon Ball. Haha, 5 stars. After getting the Dragon Ball, Clint shot straight out of the ice like a sky-piercing cannon and leapt out of the ice. At this time, Clint was walking alone in the subtropical rainforest. Looking at all kinds of strange plants, Clint couldn't help but think of Mr. Bay. In January, Clint traveled through the ice fields, wandered in the desert, fought with dinosaurs, and danced with wolves. His footprints were all over the place. All over the world, a realistic version of wilderness action is performed. Clint jumped up the tree. The diameter of this rainforest tree was more than 30 meters and the height was over 150 meters. The ancient tree was probably nothing more than that. Clint jumped lightly and took the Dragon Ball in the crown of the tree. There is only 1 star shining in the Dragon Ball, the Haha planet. Clint couldn't help but be overjoyed that he had found 6, and now he was only missing the 4 stars in Goku's hand. Clint flew towards Baozi Mountain. Wukong! Wukong! Krillin came to the door of Wukong's house and shouted loudly. Chi-Chi walked out slowly with a bulging belly and smiled. It turns out to be Uncle Xiaolin. Wukong is practicing in the back mountain. Clint looked at Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi's belly was slightly bulging, which was quite obvious. If you think about it carefully, it has been almost half a year since I came to the Dragon Ball world. Time is really worthless, Clint thought in his mind. Clint still said to Chi-Chi, it's true that Wukong is about to become a father, but he only knows how to practice and not stay at home with his children. Chi-Chi, let me help you in. Chi-Chi looked at her belly tenderly, her eyes full of maternal love, and reached out to touch her belly, seemingly full of expectation. Clint stepped forward and slowly helped Chi-Chi walk into the house. Chi-Chi smiled and explained for Wukong. If it were an ordinary person, I'm afraid Krillin might believe it, but Wukong haha. I'm going to find Goku. Krillin said to Chi-Chi. Clint flew to the back mountain, and Wukong was doing push-ups with 1 finger on the ground. He felt Clint's anger and his eyes were shining brightly. Wukong had not fought with anyone since he got married. The last time he fought with Clint doesn't count. Wukong felt extremely excited when he saw Klin. He finally had a sparring partner. Wukong flashed past and attacked Klin, but his elbow hit missed. In Klin's opinion, Wukong's movements were very slow and full of flaws. Klin's figure only moved slightly to avoid Wukong's powerful blow. Krillin hit Wukong in the shoulder with a roundhouse kick. Before Wukong could see Klin's move clearly, he flew backwards. Wukong lay on the ground with a painful expression on his face. Ah, 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 ah. It hurts. It hurts. Seeing Wukong flying backwards, Klin ran over and touched his head in embarrassment. I'm sorry, Wukong. I just kicked him. Krillin slowly helped Wukong up and muttered, Wukong, you are so true. You are not at home to spend time with Chi-Chi, but you still go out to practice blindly. You must know that you will be a father soon, and you are talking to. Omit 100 words here. Wukong looked at Klin and smiled awkwardly. Hee hee, I know, but Klin, your aura has become too strong. I'm so excited. Colin sweats. By the way, Wukong, here are the 4 planets that Grandpa Gohan left for you. Let me use them. I want to ask Shenron for a favor. Oh, I'm at home. Wukong took out the 4 stars from home and handed them to Klin. Klin looked at the 4 stars and couldn't help but feel happy. After a month of hard work, I have found them all today. Klin poured out the remaining 6 Dragon Balls from his backpack. The 7 Dragon Balls gathered together and began to shine. The exciting moment came. Klin raised his hands with palms upward and shouted loudly, come out. Shenlong. BGM up. The frequency of the 7 Dragon Balls flashing became faster and faster. Huge dark clouds came from the sky, covering the entire sky, and the surrounding environment immediately became dim. Boom. Click. The dark clouds were wrapped in lightning, and the lightning shone on the earth. It shuttled unscrupulously among the dark clouds, as if it was pouring towards the ground in an instant. The light of the Dragon Ball became more dazzling, as if echoing with the lightning in the sky. The dragon is about to come out. Klin was quite excited at this time. The dragon, as a mysterious animal, has always lived in the legends of the Chinese people, and today he was about to see it with his own eyes. His heart was surging and he couldn't help it. Own. Roar. A dragon roar came. Golden light gushed out from the Dragon Ball, and the golden light meandered towards the sky, gradually integrating with the sea of clouds in the sky, and a louder dragon roar sounded. In the sky, the endless sea of dark clouds showed the body of the green dragon. The dragon's eyes glowed red, looking at Klin and Wukong below. Say your wish. I can help you realize any wish, but there is only one. Shenlong, please try your best to help me build a space suitable for the growth of special creatures, such as fairy beans, spiritual fruits. Human, I need a space carrier. My abilities are limited and I cannot directly create space in you. That's it. Klin thought about it for a moment. Can you take a look at this? Klin took out the space capsule. This should be the space carrier. Shenlong said calmly, yes, as you wish. Shenlong's eyes flashed red. Okay, your wish has come true. I have helped you build a special growing environment. With my divine power on it, this space can absorb free special energy anytime and anywhere to replenish the space. Now you should be able to plant whatever you want. Speaking of organisms, you can also change the energy density to affect crop yields, Shenlong said humanely. If you want to open up space, you have to find a higher level Shenlong, so goodbye. Shenlong seemed to be disdainful of Klin's extraordinariness, and gave a special reminder before leaving. After that, the dragon turned into 7 Dragon Balls, hovered in the sky for a week, and prepared to fly to all parts of the world. Klin waited for the right moment, leapt up and grabbed the 4 stars that were about to fly away. He held the 4 stars in his hand, returned to the ground, and handed the 4 stars to Wukong. I'm sorry, Wukong. It will take another year for the 4 planets to return to their original state. Wukong smiled and said it didn't matter. Klin laughed heartily at this moment and carefully looked at the space he named, Fairy Bean Plantation. This space is very special. The free energy absorbed does not seem to be the energy during battle, but more like a kind of vitality. Yuanqi, as the name suggests, is a kind of life energy. This kind of energy is very special. Although it exists in a free form in the universe, it cannot be used and absorbed by people, and can only be produced in fixed places, such as the realm of the god of destruction, the realm of Kaioshin, and the depths of the underworld. Now this kind of energy is absorbed by the space. Although the amount is very small, Klin really feels that the vitality energy in the space has become abundant. When a little adds up to a lot, it will fill up the space. The fairy bean plantation is not large in scale, only 2 square meters in size. It seems that the dragon of the earth is still somewhat lacking. It must be perfected, but this can only wait until later. The space of 2 square meters is not big, but it is not small either. It is enough to cultivate 4 fairy bean plants by yourself. Yes, fairy beans are produced for many years. Like apple trees, there are trees that bear fruit every year. Cat fairy only has 1 plant. The annual output is more than 100 plants. I think I should be able to produce about 500 plants every year. However, I still have to ask the cat fairy carefully about how to cultivate the plants. Xiao Lin, let's go, it's time to eat. Wukong shouted towards Klin. Coming. Klin responded. Chi-Chi's pregnancy naturally made it inconvenient for her to cook, so it was natural for Klin to take over the position of chef. Well, Xiaolin, your cooking is really delicious, well. Wukong stuffed the rice into his mouth and spoke vaguely. Haha, then let me teach you. Klin said goodbye to Goku Chi-Chi. I'm leaving, Goku, remember to do your housework at home. Klin waved to Wukong and shouted. Before Krillin left, he taught Wukong a lesson about omitting 1,000 words. The name of the paper was, How to be a Good Husband. Wukong looked at Klin's retreating figure and murmured, Xiaolin is really wordy. Is this the reason why Xiaolin has become so strong? Wukong seems to have discovered a new world, and his eyes can't help but light up. Klin flew towards Kalen Tower, and couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly when he thought about what he had taught Wukong just now. After all, Wukong was already married, and he didn't know how many years he would be single. He was really a layman. Now that there is a fairy bean plantation, let's ask the cat fairy how to plant it, Klin thought to himself, speeding up the flight towards Kalen Tower. Based on Klin's current flying speed, it can be said to be wandering in the North Sea in the morning and Kangwoo in the evening. We arrived at Kalen Tower in just 1 cup of tea, and saw a big fat white cat dodging constantly, while a young man kept attacking and snatching the bottle of holy water on the cat immortal's cane, but the cat immortal moved. The speed is very fast, and a small move is always 1 move away. This young man is Klin's great disciple Fan Yu. Klin was watching carefully from the side. The fire level of Fan Yu was about the same. He would be able to grab the super holy water within 10 moves. Klin whispered from the side, go to the right and enter 3. When Fan Yu heard the voice, he didn't hesitate. He immediately turned to his right and took 3 steps forward. As expected, the cat immortal's next move was to dodge here and happened to bump into Fan Yu's arms. Haha, I caught it, Fan Yu shouted happily. The cat immortal couldn't help but sweat profusely. The brats are getting more and more powerful now. How can I, the immortal, lose face if this continues? The cat immortal couldn't help complaining, but he still wiped his sweat with a smile. After laughing, he ran towards Klin and knelt down with a plop. Hello, master, why are you here? Klin looked at Fan Yu and nodded with a smile. He already had 85 combat points. It seemed that he had worked hard to practice. Klin was a little relieved. Yes, the progress made is not small, keep working hard. Klin encouraged Fan Yu. Fan Yu became even more happy after hearing Klin's encouragement, and his face turned red with excitement. The person he admired most was his master. Master asked the cat immortal for some advice. Then Klin said to the cat immortal, Hello, cat immortal. I see that you are doing well recently. The cat immortal smiled. It was strange that he was not in good condition after eating fresh fish every day recently. After all, being able to eat fish is the happiest thing. That's right, what is happiness? Happiness is when cats eat fish, dogs eat meat, and Ultraman fights little monsters. Klin feels that he is under a lot of pressure. Maybe he will be happy only after marrying No. 18. Klin couldn't help but think. Cat Senin, how do you cultivate fairy beans? I want to grow some fairy beans myself. There have been a lot of fights recently and there are not enough fairy beans. Used it all so quickly. Cat Immortal couldn't believe it, there are 3,000 of them. Klin chuckled and didn't say anything. I'm afraid this won't work. Fairy beans need a special space to grow. Fairy beans cannot survive in ordinary places. Cat Immortal said with some regret. I know this, so I asked Shenlong to help me create a space suitable for growing. Now you just need to tell me how to plant. It turns out you were the one who summoned the dragon yesterday. The Cat Immortal was a little surprised, but he was relieved after a moment. How many people on Earth can gather 7 Dragon Balls? Then it's easy to handle. The Cat Immortal walked towards the depths of Kalen Tower, waving for Clint to follow. As he walked, he said, the fairy beans were accidentally discovered by the first god on Earth. That place is full of gods. After the god transplanted the fairy beans, he found that it was difficult for the fairy beans to survive in other places. Only in Kalanta, the fairy beans grew well. The god guessed that the mysterious breath of Kalanta might be stronger, and finally the fairy beans remained in Kalanta until now. That kind of breath should be the vitality of life. Clint secretly guessed. Okay. Here we are. Clint saw a large vat, with vine-like fairy beans planted inside. It looked green and full of life. There was something strange about this vat, Clint thought as he looked at the vat. This large vat is said to be connected to the god realm. I don't know exactly how it happened. After all, it is too old. It is precisely because of the existence of this large vat that fairy beans can grow. The Cat Immortal said to himself. Explained to himself. Xiao Lin, how many plants do you want? To cultivate fairy beans, you need to remove the roots from the original beads of fairy beans to cultivate new plants. Cat Immortal explained. I want 4 plants. 4 plants is already the limit of space. If there are more, the energy will not be enough and the growth rate of the plants will slow down. 4 plants is the best planting density. By the way, Neko-sama, how long does it take to cultivate the fairy beans to maturity, that is, to start growing? It will take 6 months for the plant to mature, and fairy beans will start to grow after 6 months, the Cat Immortal said after some thought. 6 months. It's not a short time, but it's also within an acceptable range. It will only be 6 months before I can continue to obtain fairy beans. I have no choice but to wait. The Cat Immortal carefully cut out 4 roots, handed them to Clint and said, carefully cultivate them. You cannot cut them from this original bead in a short time. If the original bead hurts your vitality, you must recover well. Only then did Clint notice that the Cat Immortal had some physical pain. Although he hid it very well, it could not escape Clint's eyes. I really have no choice but to meow. Clint thought to himself. Clint carefully transplanted the 4 roots into the fairy bean plantation. After planting, the energy in the space immediately surrounded the fairy beans, and turned into the nutrients needed for the fairy beans to grow little by little. Phew, Clint wiped his sweat and finished. Now he just waits for the fairy beans to blossom and bear fruit. Clint followed the Cat Immortal outside. Fan Yu was still practicing outside. Seeing this, the Cat Immortal smiled at Clint and said, Fan Yu is a good boy, kind-hearted and very diligent. You have accepted a good apprentice. Mao Immortal. The Immortal couldn't help but compare Fan Yu with the Turtle Immortal, and then clicked his tongue. He was much more diligent than the old turtle when he was young. After listening to the words of the Cat Immortal, Clint smiled and said, it's more troublesome for the Cat Immortal's teachings. I'm about to leave the Earth and I won't have the chance to teach Fan Yu in person for the time being. The Cat Immortal nodded slightly in agreement after listening to the first half of Clint's sentence, and then asked in surprise, leave the Earth? Why? Clint nodded. The Earth's environment is too comfortable. I need to keep fighting to improve my fighting ability, in order to better protect the Earth. And what I care about. Clint, you are so powerful, why can't you protect the Earth? Cat Immortal asked with disbelief. It's far from enough. The powerful enemies of the Earth in the future are unimaginable. In front of the powerful ones in the universe, he only needs to move his fingers and the Earth will turn into cosmic dust in an instant. I am afraid that I can't even compare with one of their fingers. Come on. Clint smiled bitterly. The amount of information was a bit overwhelming, and the Cat Immortal was so frightened that he was stunned and speechless. The god who was observing Clint in the temple became uneasy, and did not notice that the staff in his hand fell to the ground. Bobo noticed that something was wrong with the god, so he stepped forward and asked, what's wrong with the god? The god waved his hand to indicate that he was fine. The god was listening more carefully to the conversation between Clint and the Cat Immortal. After a long time, that's not right, there hasn't been any foreign invasion for thousands of years. The god of the temple also nodded, this is what he wanted to ask. That's because the Earth is too weak. In the universe, the Earth is a low-level planet with no value for aggression. Those forces in the universe have not noticed the Earth yet. Once they notice the Earth, I am afraid. It turns out that the Earth is a low-level planet. It's not that they didn't come to invade, it's that they didn't pay attention to the Earth at all. The cat immortal said with a dull look in his eyes at this time. Cat immortal, there is no need to be too pessimistic. When powerful enemies invade the Earth, a group of strong warriors will emerge. They will fight bloody battles for the Earth and do their best to protect the Earth, and I am one of them. One member. Why do you know this? Cat immortal still felt that he had to ask clearly. Before, I was killed by Tambourine, the subordinate of Big Demon King Piccolo. Wukong found all the Dragon Balls and revived me. After my resurrection, some memory fragments popped up in my mind from time to time. I didn't believe it at first, but as time went by, some of the fragments in it are consistent with the fragments in my own memory, which is gradually confirmed. Now I believe that I can roughly foresee things in the future. When the god heard what Clint said, his expression became more solemn, and sweat broke out on his forehead. It was obvious that the god believed what Clint said. The cat immortal fell into deep thought. Clint was so powerful that there was no need to joke about this matter. No wonder Clint had made such rapid progress in recent times. In fact, when people are in desperate situations, their powerful potential will often burst out. Clint knows that in the future, when the powerful enemies of the Earth invade, his strength will progress so fast under pressure. This is the idea of the cat immortal. Clint said, I just wanted to find an excuse to leave the Earth. By the way, I would like to remind the Earth's defense strength. Unexpectedly, the cat fairy really thought too much. Will a group of powerful warriors really emerge to protect the Earth in the future? Can they withstand the powerful forces in the universe? The cat immortal was also a little skeptical. It will definitely happen, Clint said in a firm tone, as if he wanted to give the cat immortal hope. The god murmured, powerful warriors. Will there be Piccolo among them? The god still hopes that the separated part of him can contribute its own strength to protect the Earth, so as to make up for the mistakes he has made. How can I help? Cat immortal asked Clint. Cat immortal, you can select a group of people from the next session to serve as the reserve guardian force of the Earth. The cat immortal also felt that this method was feasible and couldn't help but nodded. Clint said again, Cat immortal, I leave everything to you. I'm going to the temple to talk to the gods about how to leave the Earth. The cat immortal nodded and said, don't worry. After saying that, Clint flew towards the temple. The cat immortal felt a little relieved when he saw Clint flying away, and said silently, I can rest assured that the Earth is protected by you. Come to Fanyu and continue training. When Clint arrived at the temple, the god stood at the edge of the temple, seemingly waiting for Clint's arrival. Step, step, after a sound, Clint landed on the temple. Clint said to the god, long time no see, god. The god looked at Clint solemnly and asked, is what you and Karen just said true? Although he already believed it in his heart, he couldn't help but ask again. Clint also put away his usual cheerful expression and nodded solemnly. The god closed his eyes heavily, as if thinking about something. Actually, there is no need to worry too much. Just let nature take its course. When the day comes, the warriors guarding the Earth will protect the Earth. As long as we are here, the Earth will not die. Clint said seriously to the gods. The god opened his eyes and nodded slowly. There must be a cause and a result. The Earth has existed for so many years. The Earth has its own destiny and will not be destroyed so easily. Is there any figure of Piccolo in your memory? The god's voice was trembling with fear and expectation. Although Piccolo has changed a little recently, the god is still elusive. If Piccolo becomes an accomplice in the invasion of the Earth, then what will happen? He was really beyond redemption, and the god looked at Clint expectantly. Clint naturally knew what the god was thinking, so he nodded seriously and said seriously, Pico is a powerful warrior who protects the Earth. The god heard what he wanted to hear most. His face turned 45 degrees to the sky and he shed tears of joy. I knew, Pico. Bobo also took out a handkerchief and wiped the corners of his eyes. Bobo was happy for the god from the bottom of his heart. The god has been living in deep self-blame for these hundreds of years. Seeing this, Krillin couldn't help but said, as an outstanding Namekian, Piccolo will be the mainstay of protecting the Earth in the future. He is really the mainstay. Due to the limitations of the qualifications of Earthlings, even Krillin, the strongest Earthling, will inevitably become a soybean existence in the end. It is not an exaggeration to say that Piccolo is the mainstay. What? Namekians? The god shouted in shock. Namekians? I just found out today that I am a cosmic being. No wonder I am different from ordinary people, the god said with a solemn expression. God. Bobo looked at the god and said, I made the Dragon Ball a long time ago. At that time, I felt a sense of deja vu. Could it be that someone in my distant hometown had made something like this? The memory of my ancestors made me. God murmured. That's right, the hometown of the gods is the distant planet Namek. Hundreds of years ago, the climate of Namek changed dramatically. The parents of the gods sent the gods to the earth, but they didn't get there in time. Klin said slowly with. The god continued, I have lived in Surbiton Heights since I was a child. There is a house in Surbiton Heights. There is a letter there that says, I will be there soon, wait for me. So I believe my parents will definitely come. But I have been waiting for a long time. It's miserable. There is no food there. I have been waiting. I have been waiting for 20 years. No, 30 years. Finally I gave up. I left Surbiton. I left that house. Haha, now that I think about it, that house is a bit strange. The god smiled relaxedly, and the confusion that had puzzled him for hundreds of years was solved. That house is the spaceship that the gods took when they came to the Earth. Kling explained. I really don't know what's going on with Namek. After all, it's been hundreds of years since I left Namek. The god was full of longing for Namek and his hometown. As a person gets older, the feeling of falling leaves returning to their roots will become extremely strong, not to mention the hometown that only lives in the dreams of the gods. As an authentic descendant of Yan and Huang, Klin can understand the mood of the gods at this moment. God, do you still remember that I told the cat immortal before that I was going to leave the Earth? But with the current technology of the Earth, it is difficult to build a spaceship that can travel between the stars, so the spaceship that I carried on when I was a child is the best choice. Klin Chao the god said slowly. Well, the god nodded. God, come with me. Let's go to Namek. When the god heard what Klin said, his eyes shone brightly, then dimmed and he shook his head and said, as a god, I have the responsibility and obligation to protect the Earth, and I shouldn't leave it without permission. It doesn't matter, God. With Bobo here, we can definitely protect the Earth. Bobo hurriedly said to the god. Yes, Bobo is here, it doesn't matter. There won't be Wukong next time, so don't worry. Klin took advantage of the situation and said quickly. The god was a little hesitant, should he go? Klin finished his attack again and said, the spaceship is very fast, and it can go back and forth in just a few days. When the time comes, after asking Bo Gallant to fulfill his wish, he will no longer need the spaceship. The god hesitated even more. Namek. A phantom seemed to appear in front of the god. The god stretched out his hand to grab it, but it disappeared like a flower in the mirror. The god thought for a long time and said, okay. The god is a little guilty because the great demon King Piccolo caused a disaster to the world. Now, I am afraid that I am an incompetent god. The god said to himself. God, you have done a very good job, don't blame yourself too much. Klin comforted. The god waved his hand to indicate that Klin didn't need to say anything more. Klin swallowed back what he was about to say. Now let's go to Surbiton Heights to retrieve the spaceship. After so many years, I don't know if there is any malfunction. Klin vaguely remembered that the spacecraft seemed to have been repaired. Bobo had already taken out the flying carpet and said to the gods and Klin, please come up. Surbiton Heights is a bit far away. You can get there quickly by riding Bobo's flying carpet. Krillin and Celestial nodded and stepped onto the flying carpet. I saw Bobo reciting a spell, and suddenly the environment changed drastically. A strong wind blew past Klin's head. Klin yelled heartlessly in his heart. Teleportation was a necessary skill for fighting and escaping. He must learn it. We're here, we can go down. Bobo said slowly. It's right here, just ahead. The god said with memories on his face, but these memories were painful memories. The house is round and has 4 legs, like some kind of beetle. Sure enough, it is the unique architectural style of the Namekians. Clint thought to himself. Wait for a group of people to step forward. The god said to himself. There is no door handle or lock, just say a word and it can be opened. Bic, it means different worlds. Clint still remembered this. The god said lightly, Bic, and saw the bottom of the spacecraft landing, and everyone stood on it. Like an elevator, Clint and the god were sent into the spacecraft. Unfortunately, I don't know how to control the spacecraft. The god said helplessly. Clint chuckled. No control is needed, it is fully automatic voice recognition, but it has to use Namekian, which is the language spoken by the gods and Piccolo at the martial arts conference. The god showed an expression of realization. It seemed that he was really stupid. God, say fly, fly to the temple. The god nodded. U0026 %, U0026, U0026 %. This foreign language is really. The console displays a sequence of characters. He made it clear. Just as he was speaking, he landed on the temple in the blink of an eye. Clint and the god couldn't help but rejoice. Clint said, the spaceship is intact. God, you can return to your hometown. Everyone came out, and Clint said to the god, teach me a few simple words in Namekian language. No matter how difficult a foreign language is, you still have to learn it. There is no way around it. Clint sighed deeply. God. U0026. %, U0026 *. After a long time, he said, we are ready to leave tomorrow. Before that, we need to make some preparations, at least prepare some food, and get a bathroom in the spacecraft. God said, I photosynthesize. In Baozi Mountain. Wukong is really not good. I really can't take you with me when I go to the universe to experience. You see, Chi-Chi is about to give birth. You have to take good care of Chi-Chi. Clint explained to Wukong earnestly. Before leaving the Earth, I must come and talk to Wukong. After I leave, the guardianship of the Earth will be handed over to Wukong during this period. When Wukong heard the word, Chi-Chi, he was stunned for a moment, and did not say anything about following him to the universe. It seemed that his teachings were somewhat useful, and Clint couldn't help but give himself a thumbs up. Chi-Chi is a very good girl, and she feels wrong for marrying Wukong. Wukong has never done any housework, and Chi-Chi has always raised the child. In the face of reality, Chi-Chi has changed from a virtuous girl to a verbose woman, has always wanted Gohan to become a great scholar, just because he was afraid that Gohan would follow in the footsteps of Wukong. I don't know when I will come back when I go to the universe. It seems that it is time to find a way out for Goku's family. Let Chi-Chi work in Haidilao Group and give him 20% of her 49% dividend every year. It should be enough. Krillin, or that's the truth, as long as you have enough money to spend, money is just garbage to you. Wukong, when the child is older in 2 years, you can let Chi-Chi go to work at Haidilao Group. I will say hello to Lan Chi. Haidilao Group. What is that? Wukong asked innocently. Clint covered his head with his hands. Forget it, it's all in vain, I'll go talk to Chi-Chi. July 1, 756 AD. God, get ready to go. Bobo wiped away tears and waved goodbye to the god, as if he was parting from life and death. The two boarded the spaceship, and the god was a little happy. After all, they would be able to return to their hometown soon. Krillin said towards the console, fly dynamic. Ding, I understand, the estimated time is 5 days. The spaceship suddenly flew away from the Earth. Kalanta, Cat Immortal and Fan Yu waved to the takeoff spaceship. Cat Immortal said silently, how strong will you be when you come back next time? Piccolo, who was taller than Yuns, felt the god leave the Earth and said viciously, old guy, what are you doing again? After that, he looked towards the sky. Clint looked out the window at the distant blue planet and clenched his fists silently. Wait for me, on the 18th, I will be back soon. Namek is very far away from the Earth. The fastest spaceship imitated using the advanced technology of ancient Namek and the Saiyans would take a month to fly. Clint looked at the uneasy look on the god's face and laughed awkwardly and said, God, I'm sorry I lied to you. It will take us a month to arrive. The god seemed to have expected it a long time ago and did not say anything, but his expression looked a little scared. The so-called timidity of being close to home refers to the god's current state. Klin comforted. The Namekians are a peace-loving race, and most of them are kind and honest. Klin silently added in his heart. Except Slag, who is a Namek with an absolutely evil heart. Nemesis, Slug's fighting talent is even better than Piccolo's. After regaining his youth and transforming into a super Namek, his strength is even more astonishing, reaching 200 million. Even in his old age, he has 40 million. The god was still thinking, and it seemed that he could not untie the knot in the god's heart until Namek. Klin shook his head and said with a bitter smile. 1 month can't be wasted, you must take advantage of this time to practice quickly. After saying that, Klin took out the gravity training room. Klin pressed the button 100 times, and the surrounding environment suddenly turned dark red, and the air became much heavier. A smile appeared on Klin's lips. Hee, it's a feeling I haven't seen in a long time. 1 month later. Ding, the landing on Namek is expected to take 5 minutes. The console made a mechanical sound. Klin was sitting cross-legged, slowly opened his eyes, and exclaimed, "We're finally here." When Klin reached the 28th day of training, he stopped high-intensity training. No one could predict what would happen in the universe. Klin had to maintain his best condition. System, View Properties. Time, 756 AD. Name, Klin. Age, 21 years old. Race, Earthling. Dimension, First Level Dimension, equivalent to Cat Immortal. Combat Strength, 340,000, Next Level Limit 1.5 million. Potential, 1.16 million. Cultivation Speed, Light Speed. I have only increased by 30,000 this month. The speed is still a bit slow. But now that I have limited energy and open a VIP practice, I will not be able to last for a few days. It is far less cost-effective than practicing at the speed of light. There is a long way to go, so take your time. Klin couldn't help but sigh. Arriving at Namek a minute later, the console rang again. At this time, we can already see the outline of Namek. The entire planet is green. There are several bright companion stars next to the planet. They are probably first magnitude stars according to the brightness of the Earth. The spacecraft is traveling at high speed and slowly enters the atmosphere. The sky is green. Yes, I can see more clearly that Namek is not a complete planet, but a planet composed of hundreds of islands. The god stood in front of the spaceship door, holding the magic staff in both hands. A thin layer of sweat appeared on his forehead, looking at the familiar yet unfamiliar hometown outside without saying a word. Boom. The spacecraft successfully landed on a higher island. The destination has arrived at Namek. It took 29 days and 10 hours. The console still made that rigid voice, but it seemed to have a bit of joy. Could it be because he had returned to his hometown? God, let's go down. Klin said to the god. Well, the god nodded. The two slowly walked out of the spacecraft. The god took a deep breath of air, listened to the trembling in the breeze, looked at the river and the strange trees in front of him, and felt mixed emotions in his heart. The god said in a voiceless voice, "Hundreds of years. I finally returned to my hometown. This is my hometown. Nilu, I feel that there are tribesmen coming to Namek. It's a very kind atmosphere. It's 2,000 kilometers to the east. Go and greet the new tribesmen." The Great Elder's huge body was lying on the chair, and his breath was dying slowly. Said. Yes, Great Elder. Nilu said to the Great Elder respectfully. God, let's go find the leader of Namek, the Great Elder. There is a powerful aura in the southwest. If I guessed correctly, that is the location of the Great Elder. Klin said with some excitement. Yes, that is the location of the Great Elder. Since I set foot on Namek, I seem to have remembered a few things, and it is a bit vague, but I can clearly feel the location of the Great Elder. The god said with some confusion. Someone is coming towards us. His aura is very similar to that of Piccolo. Judging from the aura, he should have a fighting strength of 40,000. Klin said calmly. Klin did not panic, he could kill him with just 40,000. As expected, it must be Nairu. Nairu is a fighting Namekian, so it is not unusual to have 40,000 combat power. It seems that it is Nairu. The Great Elder is very powerful. As soon as he and the gods arrived, Nelu came over. Sure enough, he is still a person who has lived for hundreds of years. Klin thought silently. Nilu's flying speed was still very fast, and he arrived at Klin's landing point in a short time. Nilu looked at the old god and was very surprised in his heart. that his people still survived on other planets. Nilu landed, and when he got closer, he said respectfully, "Elders who have come from afar, Nilu has met the seniors." Then he bowed to the god. The god of heaven is a figure of the same period as the Great Elder, and has lived for hundreds of years. The children of the Great Elder are basically the juniors of the God of Heaven, and there is nothing wrong with calling Nairu a senior. Nelu only showed hostility to those who offended the Great Elders. At other times, Nelu was a simple and kind-hearted warrior. The god looked at Nilu. He looks similar to Piccolo, but his aura is completely different from that of Piccolo. Nilu's aura is restrained and peaceful, without the violence in Piccolo's aura. "Get up, child," the god said calmly, his eyes full of love, just like a grandfather looking at his grandson. "Can you take us to see the Great Elder?" The god asked Nilu. "It was the Great Elder who ordered me to come to greet the Elder." "Elder, please come with me. The journey is a bit long." "Elder, please get on my back and let me carry you. My mission is to protect the Great Elder. I cannot leave the Great Elder for too long, so we have to rush back as soon as possible." After saying that, Nelu bent down. When the god saw this, he naturally got on Nelu's back. When Klin saw this, he said, "I will never compete with you for the opportunity to fulfill my filial piety. Hehe, let's go." Nelu flew towards the Great Elder carrying the god, followed closely by Krillin. Tap, step. He landed on a very high pillar. The Great Elder lived here. The building style of the house in front of him was really similar to that of the spaceship. The aesthetics were really. Klin felt a little small in his heart. Idea. "Great Elder." Nelu said respectfully, "Let them come in." The god walked towards the Great Elder step by step with his staff. Klin was about to follow, but Nelu stretched out his hand to stop Klin. Nelu was really worried about the outsider Nelu. When Klin saw Nelu blocking him, he said without anger or joy, "Young master is still angry and wants to fight. Klin has endured it for so long and already wants to find a master to fight against. Hehe, you forced me, I didn't do it first. Naru, let the guests come in." His aura is very peaceful and kind, and he is an upright person. The Great Elder's voice sounded again. "Yes, Great Elder." Nelu said politely to Klin, "Please come in, guest." Klin had no choice but to give up. Klin knew that this was Naru's duty and would not have any other ideas. If he wanted to fight, there would be more opportunities. Naru was also a person who liked fighting. After all, he was a fighting Namek. Man, Klin also saw the fighting spirit in Nelu's eyes just now. "Thank you, let's go in together." Naru nodded. Klin walked in and looked at the Great Elder lying on the chair. At this time, he thought in his heart, he is indeed the Great Elder. He is so big. The Great Elder was lying on the chair, his breath seemed to be vague. The Great Elder's body could hold up 2 or 3 ordinary Namekians. The Great Elder looked at the god kindly and seemed to have fallen into memories again. After a long time, he said, "It's really. You look so much like Kadaz, you must be Kadaz's child, welcome home." The god said with some confusion, "The Earth God has met the Great Elder, but there is no impression of Kadaz in my mind. Kadaz is your father. Hundreds of years ago, the climate of Namek changed drastically. Your father sent you out, but he didn't make it in time. I didn't expect you to actually survive." The Great Elder said slowly, as if he was about to die if he couldn't take one breath. Klin calculated that the Great Elder should have 5 years left in his life. The god listened carefully to the Great Elder's account of what happened hundreds of years ago. Before the gods could speak, the Great Elder spoke again. Namek was destroyed in that catastrophe, and the Namek civilization that lasted for countless generations was destroyed like that. In the end, I was the only one left. The Great Elder said his eyes were a little hollow, as if he was caught up in the scene of the destruction of Namek that day. After listening to the Great Elder's narration, the deep memories in God's heart seemed to have some traces of awakening. Suddenly, some memories flashed through God's mind. His father hurriedly stuffed himself into the spaceship and said to himself with a loving look on his face, "You go first, wait. I will be there soon." Suddenly the picture in the god's mind changed. Namek began to sink, countless tribesmen were wailing in pain, Namek was swallowed up by darkness bit by bit. Ha! 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 The god stumbled and fell back to reality. He held the staff tightly with both hands and closed his eyes tightly. Big beads of sweat began to drip from his frowning brow. The god gasped for breath. The god slowly opened his eyes and looked very painful. The god said in a voiceless voice, "I remember. Child, the painful era has passed. What we have to do now is to rebuild our home." The great elder said softly and slowly. The great elder's voice was very soothing and calm. Then the great elder said to Klin, "The earth warriors from afar welcome you to Namek." "Thank you, great elder." Klin smiled politely at the great elder. "I have a premonition that Namek will be invaded soon. My original premonition was that a blonde warrior would defeat the evil and rescue the people of Namek. But 7 months ago, my premonition suddenly changed. There was also a bald boy with strong fighting ability who defended Namek. At the critical moment, the bald boy turned the tide and finally defeated the evil." Ahem, the great elder began to cough continuously as he spoke. When the god of heaven heard that Namek was about to be invaded again, his expression changed drastically. Why is fate so unfair? Why do the Namekians suffer such a disaster? The god of heaven cried out feebly in his heart. After hearing this, Klin couldn't help but feel excited. Wasn't he the one who had just arrived in the Dragon Ball world 7 months ago? Has my arrival changed the future that the great elder sees? Originally it was Goku who defeated Frieza with Krillin offering sacrifices to the sky, and his power is boundless, but now he and Goku joined forces to defeat Frieza. Can you really foresee such a long future? At first, I wasn't sure about the future I foresaw. Time and space are a very mysterious force, no one can tell for sure, and the future I met has changed. But now that I have met you, I am sure that my thoughts. The great elder spoke with some difficulty, and the last words seemed to pop out one by one. The god looked at Klin and his heart was shocked. Bald boy. Klin will save Namek in the future. This is too hard to believe. The god knew that Klin was very powerful, but he did not expect to be so strong. The god felt that he had been shocked enough today. Great elder, please rest assured, I will do my best to protect this simple, kind-hearted and peace-loving Namekian. Klin said to the great elder with a reassuring tone. After all, he will have to ask for help from others later. Besides, what Klin just said was definitely from the bottom of his heart. The Namekians are a lovely race. After listening to Klin's words, the great elder smiled happily and closed his eyes. If it weren't for his long breathing, Klin would have thought that the great elder had died. Klin stood there, waiting for the great elder. About 5 minutes later, the great elder opened his eyes again. The temporary rest restored the great elder's energy and smiled happily. Sorry to trouble you, Namek. The future is in your hands. Klin nodded solemnly and must do what he promised to others, not to mention how much the great elder believed in himself. Child, come forward. I feel that there is an amazing power in your body. Now let me help you develop it. The great elder said to Klin. Great elder. You need to rest and can't waste your energy like this anymore. Nelu looked at the great elder worriedly. It doesn't matter, developing potential is my special ability and does not consume physical strength. The great elder said slowly. After hearing this, Klin couldn't help but feel overjoyed. He had been thinking about how to speak just now. He just felt sleepy and gave him a pillow. Great elder, you are so considerate. In the original book, Krillin's combat power was 1,500 when he arrived on Namek, but after the great elder developed his potential, it reached 13,000. His combat power increased nearly 10 times. His current combat power is 335,000. After being developed by the great elder, wouldn't it be possible to reach 330? 10,000. The combat power of 3.3 million is enough to fight Frieza directly. Even if he can't defeat Frieza, he can still escape thousands of miles away when Frieza transforms. Haha, it's exciting to think about it. Klin slowly walked towards the great elder and stopped under the great elder's hand. The great elder moved his arm with great effort, and put his hand on Klin's head, haha. Klin's body was wrapped in a layer of energy, and Klin felt as if his power was being pulled out. Ding! Foreign energy has been detected and is pulling the host's power. The system is blocking it. Ding! The prevention was successful, but the power pull failed. Klin couldn't help but cursed. He finally had a chance to explode with combat power and asked you to stop it, system. System. Come out. If you don't explain it clearly to me today, I will uninstall you. Klin said angrily. The system said calmly. I'm just going to say one thing, just one thing. The sound was like a slap in the face. I don't want face. Do you have my permission to explore the host's ability in front of this system? If it were so easy. I just raised my combat power. Where can I get energy? After that, the system's voice suddenly stopped. What? With such a stupid excuse, you wasted my opportunity to get a promotion of 3 million. Go to hell. Hehe, that's not entirely true. You really thought there would be a tenfold increase. Let me tell you rudely that, subject to the limit of human qualifications on Earth, you can only reach 1.5 million combat power. No more nonsense, you take a look at your attribute board yourself. System, view properties. Time, 756 AD. Name, Clin. Age, 21 years old. Race, Earthling. Dimension, first level dimension, equivalent to cat immortal. Combat strength, 350,000, the next level limit is 1.5 million. Potential, 4.65 million. Cultivation speed, light speed. Hey, that's not right. Why did my potential become 4.65 million? To put it simply, the Great Elder's potential development does not directly increase your combat effectiveness, but adds it to your potential. Originally, your potential was only 1.5 million, but now it has become 5 million. How about it? Be grateful. The system said rudely. It seems that Clint suddenly understood that when he reaches 1.5 million combat power, he will inevitably spend a lot of energy to break through the limit, and his current energy is obviously not enough. It seems that it is still more expensive than directly increasing his combat power. Much better value for money. After a moment, the Great Elder made a questioning voice. He had clearly drawn out his potential just now, why was he missing now? It's really puzzling. Sorry kid, you obviously have great potential, but I can't bring it out. The Elder looked at Clin apologetically. Clin already knew that the system had blocked the Great Elder's power, and said with a smile, it doesn't matter. You can also unleash your potential by practicing step by step. Great Elder, I have another unkind request. Clin rubbed his palms and asked the Great Elder awkwardly but politely. Son, tell me, although I don't have enough energy left, the people of Namek will help you. The Great Elder said with a smile. I hope to borrow your Dragon Ball. I want to ask Shenron for some help. Because the ability of Shenron on Earth is limited, I want to ask Shenron from Namek. Krillin explained slowly. Oh. As far as I know, Kadaz is a very good dragon, and as a child of Kadaz, the god should also be an excellent dragon warrior. The power of the Dragon Ball should be enough, right? The Elder asked with some confusion. The god smiled bitterly and said, 300 years ago, in order to become a qualified god, I expelled the evil thoughts from my body, and then my power was divided into two. Stupid. How can a person's heart be completely pure? People without selfish desires cannot be called human beings. As an excellent dragon, he split his power into two. This is even more stupid. The Elder suddenly became powerful and loudly lectured the god. The god lowered his head tightly, his face turned red with embarrassment, he touched his head with his hand and smiled. No problem, I'll leave the Dragon Ball matter to Nilu, and Nilu will help you collect the Dragon Balls from each village. The Elder said as if he had exhausted all his strength in reprimanding the gods, and now he lay weakly on the chair. Yes, Great Elder. Nelu said respectfully. Although Nelu wanted to fight Clin, protecting the Great Elder was his most important responsibility. Nelu hesitated and never said it. Go, Nelu, as a fighting Namekian, the battlefield is his home field. An old voice came, and the Great Elder looked at Nelu with a smile. As a fighting Namekian, Naru desires to fight in his heart, but Naru can never forget his main responsibility. No, Great Elder. Nelu shook his head firmly. Go, child, go, child. The Great Elder said with a smile. Namek is safe now, don't worry about me. The Great Elder stretched out his hand and waved. Naru showed his fighting spirit towards Krillin. Seeing this, Clin paused slightly. Come on, Nelu. Naru nodded slightly. The two exploded and flew into the distance, crossing many rivers and many isolated hills. The two of them stopped on a stone pillar that looked like an abalone. Clin looked at Nelu from a distance, sucked the oxygen in the air, twisted his neck, and the joints made a clicking sound. Clin's fighting spirit burst out, but Clin suppressed his breath to 40,000. At the same time, the battle with Nilu has honed more combat skills and experience. System, view Nilu's attributes. Ding. Time, 756 AD. Name, Nuru. Age, youth. Race, Namekian. Combat strength, 40,000. Potential, there are still hundreds of millions, which is higher than yours anyway. Practice speed, high speed. Seeing that his potential was hundreds of millions higher than his own, Clint exclaimed in his heart, "People on Earth, what kind of evil have you done?" Nairu took off the Namekian's exclusive combat clothes, and Nairu twisted his neck. Suddenly, the two of them exploded and rushed away. A cold light flashed in Nailu's eyes, and an elbow struck diagonally towards Clint. In Clint's eyes, Nailu's actions were naturally not enough, and Clint looked behind him. He dodged, and the Jeet fist hit Nailu. Because he suppressed his aura, the attack did not cause effective damage to Nailu. Boom, boom, boom. Gaolu's aura condensed again, and powerful energy formed around Nailu's body. At this time, Nailu's aura had been raised to the extreme, and his figure moved towards Clint at high speed. Clint didn't hesitate when he saw this, he burst out his own aura and rushed straight towards Nailu. Boom boom boom, the figures of the two people kept flashing. At this time, the two people had already fought hundreds of moves. The silhouettes of the two people formed two different trajectories, green and golden, like two sharp arrows intertwined with each other, constantly flashing across the island. Nuru, as a Namekian, also has special fighting skills. The two were fighting. Nuru's arm suddenly grew tens of meters long and grabbed Clint's body. Clint smiled slightly, and it turned out to be the same as Piccolo. Clint took advantage of the situation to jump up and quietly avoided Nailu's attack. Nailu was frightened by Clint's actions. "You actually knew that I would make such a sudden attack." Krillin laughed loudly. "Biko on Earth is also a fighting Namek." Pico. Nuru murmured. Soon Nailu regained his fighting spirit and blasted towards Clint powerfully. Clint increased his speed and moved flexibly towards Nailu. Nailu was indeed a fighting type and the Namekians quickly found him. Clint's movement flawed, and he punched hard. "No," Clint secretly shouted, and then made a defensive posture, but Nailu's punch was well prepared, and the power was very powerful, booming in an instant. Clint was sent flying hundreds of meters. As a combat-type Namekian, Nairu's fighting talent is quite good. He did not miss this opportunity and hit Krillin with a long-charged Qigong. This Qigong was very similar to Piccolo's demon penetration light kill cannon. Although Clint's combat power far exceeds Nailu's, he still feels threatened by this Qigong. Clint is in a semi-flying state and can only protect his body by combining his hands. Boom, boom, boom. Clint was knocked away from a distance and hit dozens of islands in succession. A huge arc was formed on the lake, which did not recover for a long time. This was formed by the evaporation of high-energy Qigong as it passed through the lake. Of hoo hoo hoo. Nailu gasped, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth inadvertently. It seemed that he had won the battle. Bah, bah, bah. I ate a mouthful of dirt. Clint slowly walked out of the smoke and wiped his mouth. Clint's upper half of clothing was destroyed again, and his muscular upper body looked a little scarred, but in fact Clint was not substantially injured. Nailu's mouth opened wide, as if he couldn't believe it. Nailu knew very well the power of his move just now. It was more than enough to destroy Namek. Krillin probably didn't have the strength to fight anymore. The power of that move just now is indeed very powerful. No one should be able to stop it with the same combat power, but it's a pity that they met me, ha ha ha. Clint said again. This time it's my turn to attack. After saying that, Clint's figure flashed across, appeared from behind Nailu, and struck straight at Nailu. Suddenly, Nailu was like a kite that had fallen off the string, and it hit the ground straight. With a bang, the island was smashed through, and tens of meters of water splashed nearby. Nailu fell hard towards the bottom of the water. With the help of the buffering force of the water, the strength was reduced by a few points. The water splash jumped tens of meters, and it started to rain lightly. Clint did not pursue it. Clint felt Nailu's breath in the sky and knew that Nailu was taking advantage of the situation to recover his strength. About 5 minutes later, Nailu slowly flew out of the water, dripping with water, and veins appeared on his body. The green liquid dripped toward the water below, huffing and puffing, breathing heavily. Your strength is beyond my imagination. You are really powerful. At first, the Great Elder said that you could save Namek. I was a little disdainful, but now I have changed my mind. You are indeed capable of saving Namek, but I not admitting defeat. Nelu said calmly to Klin. Take the move, Klin. Next is my strongest trick. Nelu shouted towards Klin. Klin did admire Naru's strong will to fight. When the battle reached this point, Naru was completely supported by his strong will. After Nelu said that, his body changed a little and seemed to become taller. Is this the Namekian's gigantism technique? But it doesn't look like it. I have seen Piccolo use it. His body size is much larger than this. It's huge, and its movements have become slower. Nelu won't be so stupid. Krillin thought as he looked at Nelu's changes. Immediately afterwards, Nelu's aura changed horribly, reaching 100,000, 200,000, 400,000, reaching the limit. Klin next to him couldn't help shouting when he saw this. The combat power has actually increased tenfold. The air for hundreds of miles centered around the two people continued to shake, and the boulders also trembled. Klin didn't dare to raise his head, and hurriedly summoned up all the breath in his body, but he was still 70,000 short of Nelu's combat power. A figure flashed behind Klin, so fast, Klin didn't see Nelu's figure clearly. Then he flew out upside down, and Naru's attacks hit Klin like raindrops. Klin had been seriously injured. Klin exploded and fled backwards with all his strength. Naru's arms suddenly stretched out and fixed Klin 10 meters away from him. Naru's tentacles emitted ZC sound was condensing energy, and Klin felt that the energy contained in it would cause serious injuries even if he was hit by it. Klin tried his best to get free, and Klin raised a hand slightly. With a slight shout, Chi Yuan slash, Krillin condensed a Chi Yuan slash and slashed towards Nelu's arms. In an instant, Nelu's arms were cut off, and Klin also took the opportunity to break away from Nelu's arms and fly upwards. Seeing this, Nelu smiled slightly, and saw the energy from the two tentacles on his head flying towards Klin. Boom! Klin was hit in the front and fell directly to the ground. Although he did not fly out, the energy of these two attacks was only stronger than the previous attack. The energy of these two attacks also reached 400,000. Nelu smiled slightly as he watched Klin being hit, then closed his eyes and slammed the rock behind him, lying on the ground as if he had lost his life. The ground was soaked with dark green liquid, and green blood continued to ooze from Nelu's arms. The ground was lightly covered with a layer of liquid. At this time, Nelu was lying on the ground with his eyes closed, as if he had cut off his life, only every breath it took a few minutes for the pulse to beat slightly. Klin stared blankly at the sky, breathing slowly. Klin seemed to want to take the fairy beans, but he fainted from the pain when he moved a little. The god who was far away from the battlefield became a little anxious and asked eagerly, Great Elder, why haven't they come back after being gone for so long? They just burst out with so much momentum that they can't breathe. The Great Elder smiled slightly. It's okay, just wait quietly for them to come back. The god nodded, but he never let go of the anxious look on his face. 2 days later. Klin's physical strength has been restored by the system, but all the bones in his body seem to have fallen apart and he is still unable to move. The fairy beans are in the capsule and he can't take them out now. Klin is a little anxious at this time, not for himself, but for himself. Krillin felt that Naru's breath was about to disappear. Naru was an excellent warrior. It would be a pity to die like this. If other Namekians knew that Naru died in a battle with him, it would be difficult for the Great Elder to speak with the help of Dragon Balls. System, are you dead? Say something if you are not dead. Ding, welcome to Call Me, I can help you with anything. Quote. Stop talking nonsense and get me a fairy bean quickly. Hurry up. Hehe, no problem. Deduct 10,000 energy. The system said humbly. It's so easy. I knew it wouldn't be so easy, but I can't control it so much now. Nelu's aura is getting weaker and weaker. Clinton felt a sweet bean in his mouth, and Clinton slowly chewed and swallowed it. Klin opened his eyes suddenly, his injuries fully recovered. Klin quickly took out a fairy bean from the capsule and jumped in the direction of Nelu. Klin looked at the scene where Nelu fell to the ground. Nelu's trauma was much more serious than his own, and he still had half a breath left at most. Although he could not move, his injuries would recover over time, but Nelu's injuries would recover as time went by. Differently, Naru will die over time. Clin slowly bent down, opened Neilu's mouth and filled the fairy beans in. After Clin breathed a breath of air at Neilu, Neilu moved slightly, and after a long time he heard a bang. Neilu slowly swallowed the fairy beans. As the fairy beans were eaten, Neilu suddenly opened his eyes and found that Clin was looking at him. Neilu smiled faintly. I lost. Clin also smiled without saying anything, and slowly helped Neilu up. The broken parts of Neilu's arms had healed and were no longer bleeding, but they had not yet grown back. Krillin had some questions. If Naru could unleash such powerful combat power, why didn't he show it when fighting Frieza? Neilu's powerful fighting power did not last long, so it depends on Neilu's purpose. Naru's fight with Frieza was simply to delay time. If he exploded with powerful combat power, he would soon lose his ability to fight. Feeling bored, Frieza would naturally kill Naru quickly and go again. Find the Great Elder. Naru showed off his fighting ability bit by bit to attract Frieza's interest to delay time and better buy time for Dandy. Fighting Namekians really shouldn't be underestimated. Clin couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. Neilu stood up slowly and said to Clin, I'm sorry, I haven't experienced such a battle for a long time. In the end, I tried my best, and almost made a big mistake. There is a limit to a high explosive power, and it will enter a long period of weakness after the explosion. Even if he explodes with such power, he is no match for Clin. Naru is really convinced by Clin. But Neilu couldn't help but feel a little bitter inside. Clin laughed loudly, it doesn't matter. Fighting with you opened my eyes and brought me one step closer to understanding martial arts. Yes, if I die, what will happen to the safety of the Great Elder? Neilu said deliberately. Clin. Narahaha, just kidding. Clin, stand further away. Good. Hey, the veins on Neilu's head were exposed, the broken arm kept squirming, and suddenly the broken arm shot out 2 splashes of water, and Neilu's broken arm grew back again. The food that Clin gave me was amazing. Not only did my physical strength completely recover, but the period of weakness was also over. Naru flexed his new arm. It feels pretty good. How many days have we been out, Clin? Nelu asked Clin. 3 days. What? 3 days? Neilu shouted in fright. Neilu quickly got up and flew towards the Great Elder. Neilu did not forget his duty. Wait for me, Neilu. Then Clin exploded and chased in Neilu's direction. Neilu flew towards the Great Elder with all his strength. After a moment, whirring, Neilu began to breathe heavily. He wiped the sweat on his head and saw that the Great Elder's residence was safe and sound. He breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Okay. You are safe with the Great Elder, otherwise you will be a sinner on the entire Namek planet. Why are you flying so fast? As long as we are here, nothing will happen to the Great Elder. Clin then arrived and said to Neilu. Neilu looked at Clin gratefully and nodded with a smile. This gratitude not only represented Clin's commitment to the Great Elder, but also represented Clin's happy fight with him, which satisfied his desire to fight. Heart. In the next time, I will protect the Great Elder with peace of mind and will not engage in any other battles until the Great Elder dies. The god is sitting there chatting with the Great Elder. He has not seen his people for many years. The god is like a lost child who has found his mother. He has endless things to say, but the elder is old and sometimes talks. After saying that, he fell asleep, while the god was quietly waiting for the Great Elder to speak again. Great Elder, I'm back. Neilu said respectfully to the Great Elder. Are you coming back so soon? The Great Elder looked at Neilu, who was full of energy. Neilu's expression had changed a lot from before, and he was more happy. The Great Elder spoke with admiration again. Neilu, you belong to the wonderful battlefield. The Great Elder did not ask about the result of the battle. The Great Elder knew at this time that the result was not important, but the process was more important. At this time, the spirit reflected in Neilu's body was the best result. The Great Elder slowly closed his eyes and fell asleep again. There is no night on Namek, it is always day, which satisfies the photosynthesis of the Namekians. Clin yawned, feeling really uncomfortable. Neilu, I'll leave it to you to borrow your Dragon Balls. Clin said to Neilu in a pleading tone. No problem, leave it to me. I'll summon the elders of each village and ask them to send the Dragon Balls. After saying that, Neilu found an open space and sat down, his body floating in the air, just like Piccolo when he was practicing. Scene. Immediately afterwards, special dragon radio waves were emitted with Nelu as the center. Special information radio waves that only the Namekians could receive. Great Elder, I have an order. The chiefs of each village please bring the dragon beads to gather. Namek is very big, and Namekians are spread all over the place. Thousands of miles away, a peaceful tribe is organizing the planting of puffball tree seedlings. Just after they were planted, an old Namekian closed his eyes, received the special radio waves sent by Nilu. Dandy, come here. Third Elder Mullen shouted towards Dandy. Dandy trotted over and asked with a smile, what's the matter, Elder? Nelu just sent a message to all the villages. The Great Elder is going to summon Longzu. You haven't seen Brother Nelu for a long time. Let's go together now. Mullen said with a smile. Really? That's great. Dandy shouted with joy in his eyes. We are quite far away from the Great Elder, so go back and pack up quickly, take the Dragon Balls and get ready to go. Yeah. Dandy nodded obediently and ran towards home. Namek is now in a long period of stability, and there is no need to worry about the invasion of evil alien forces. Furthermore, the individual combat capabilities of Namekians are not weak. Raditz can dominate the universe with a combat power of 1500. Therefore, Namek's defensive power is still quite strong. Of course, it is another matter in front of a boss with billions of combat power. When Naru sent the signal, the same thing happened in Namek villages all over the planet. The elders carried the Dragon Balls and rushed towards the Great Elder. Each village is at different distances from the Great Elder's residence, so the arrival time of each village is also different. The Third Elder is the first to arrive. After several days of trekking, Dandy and the Third Elder finally arrived at the residence of the Great Elder. Dandy saw Nelu from a distance and shouted loudly, Brother Nelu. Dandy waved towards Nelu and ran away. Past. Klin looked behind him, and the first thing he saw was a miniature version of Piccolo. Behind the miniaturized version of Piccolo there was an old Namekian, but what Klin paid more attention to was the large dragon ball he was holding in his hand. Nelu turned around and saw Dandy. He was a little surprised and walked forward without thinking. Nairu picked up Dandy skillfully and said with a smile, Dandy, why are you here? Is this Dandy? Klin looked at it, and he remembered that Dandy was also a very good dragon. Dandy also said happily, I haven't seen Brother Nelu for a long time. The elder came to give the dragon beads, so I followed him. Dandy is the 108th son of the Great Elder, so strictly speaking, the remaining Namekians except the Great Elder are all brothers, but their ages are different. The older one naturally becomes the elder, so although the three elders are Dandy's older brother, but actually more like his grandfather. Nelu looked at the Third Elder walking behind him, but he couldn't hold back the smile on his face when facing his tribemate Nelu. Third Elder, long time no see. Well, Nelu, how are you, the Great Elder? Very good, it's inside. The Third Elder handed the Dragon Ball to Nelu and walked towards the house. Brother Nelu, I'm going to see the Great Elder first. After saying that, Dandy ran towards the house. Nelu, let me see the Dragon Ball. Klin's eyes shone brightly and he said excitedly towards Nelu. Nelu smiled. What's the rush? One Dragon Ball still won't work. You have to gather 7 of them. After Nelu said that, he handed the Dragon Ball to Klin. Of course I know this, but such a big Dragon Ball really piqued my curiosity. Klin took the large Dragon Ball smoothly. Klin looked at this Dragon Ball, which was as big as a basketball. It was crystal clear with 3 stars twinkling. Haha, it's a 3-star planet. The bigger it is, the stronger it is. The Third Elder walked into the room and looked at the old god with some doubts. He had no impression of him in his mind, and he had never heard of Namekians living outside of Namek. Mullen suppressed the curiosity in his heart. Still greeting the Great Elder. Great Elder. The Third Elder bowed towards him and said respectfully. The Great Elder opened his eyes and looked at Mullen. Mullen is here, sit down. Mullen found a place to sit down at random, but Mullen was still looking at the god, and the god also looked at Mullen with a little embarrassment. Another day passed, and all the elders had arrived. The Great Elder sat on top and slowly said, This young man comes from the distant earth. This time he came to Namek and wanted to borrow the Dragon Balls. I have a premonition that he will be in the future. Help Namek survive this difficult time. Since the Great Elder had no objection, the elders gave the Dragon Ball to Nelu when they entered the room. One more thing. This is a Namekian from Earth. Today he recognizes his ancestor. His father is Kadaz. The Great Elder said in a gentle tone. What? It's Kadaz's child. The elders below were a little surprised. Kadaz is a very outstanding dragon. I heard from the Great Elder that he sent his children to other planets. I didn't expect that his children actually survived. Several elders seemed a little unbelievable. But the god was standing in front of him. The elders stepped forward together and looked at the god. The god was a little nervous, and there were some beads of sweat on his forehead. He was at a loss when facing the gazes of the elders. All the elders said loudly together, "Welcome home." Ha ha ha, everyone laughed. It was a great joy for the Namek people to have another outstanding dragon warrior. After gathering the 7 Dragon Balls, Clint pulled Naru and flew towards the distant wasteland, but he must not get too close to affect the Great Elder's rest. Nelu put the Dragon Ball on the ground. Nelu glanced at Clint, and Clint nodded slightly. Suddenly Naru shouted, "Come out, Shenlong." Namekian language. The scene was similar to when the Earth summoned the dragon. The frequency of the 7 Dragon Balls flashing continued to increase, the sky was wrapped in dark clouds, and lightning illuminated the Earth. The difference was that the dimming of Namek was more intense than that of the Earth. Roar. A loud dragon roar resounded through the sky. Thunder roared in the darkness, and golden lightning flashed like angry dragons, constantly shuttling in the dark clouds. Golden light gushed out from the Dragon Ball, and the golden light meandered towards the sky, gradually integrating with the sea of clouds in the sky, and a louder dragon roar sounded. In the sky, the endless sea of dark clouds showed the huge body of the green dragon. The dragon's eyes glowed red. Looking at Naru and Piccolo below, the Namek dragon was much uglier than the Earth dragon. Say your wish, any wish is fine, but I can only help you realize 3. Bo Galen's voice sounded older than the voice of the dragon on Earth. Naru was a little shocked when he saw the huge Bogalen. He had never seen Bogalen before. Is this Bogalen? Naru thought excitedly. Clint was a little confused about the 3 wishes. 2 of them had already thought about teleportation plus cosmic star map. Should the remaining one strengthen the fairy bean plantation, or learn the language of the god level? The former can improve your own energy income, the latter is related to your future. If you don't know god level language, even if the Super Dragon Ball is placed in front of you, you have no chance to use it, which is really embarrassing. Ding, now you know the importance of mastering a foreign language. Hehe, I know the language of God, so you know what to choose. The system said again slightly meanly. After hearing what the system said, Clint's eyes shone, then there will be no problem. My first wish, Nelu, is to ask Shenlong to help me improve the fairy bean plantation as much as possible. Here Clint still took advantage of a loophole. The best way to say it is that Shenlong will do his best to fulfill his wish. After hearing this, Nelu repeated to Shenlong according to Krillin's words. This wish is extremely easy. A red light flashed in Shenlong's eyes, but the 2 red lights lasted for a long time. A drop of sweat flowed from Bo Galen's head. Bo Galen secretly thought, I've been fooled. This kid is quite powerful. After a long time, this wish has come true. I helped you expand the scale of the fairy bean plantation, and opened up a special space in your spirit as a carrier to carry the fairy bean plantation. Quote. Clint felt that there was a special spiritual mark in his mental power. Clint used his mental power to communicate with it. The mental power poured into the fairy bean plantation. The scale expanded more than 5 times, and the speed of absorbing vitality also became faster. A lot. Although Bogalen was not good looking, Clint liked people who did practical things, and Clint couldn't help but praise Bogalen in his heart. Say your second wish. The old voice sounded in their ears again. Nelu, my second wish is to obtain all the star trajectory maps of this universe including adjacent universes. Clint said calmly towards Nelu. In fact, Clint was a little uneasy in his heart, and did not know whether Shenlong could obtain the phase map. Star map of the neighboring universe. Are there other universes? Nelu had some doubts, but still said to Shenlong as before. I'm sorry, I can only get the star maps of the 6th and 7th universes, because these 2 universes are companion to each other, that is, they are opposite. Bogalen's old voice said. Naru glanced at Klin, waiting for Klin's meaning. Bo Galen's power was limited. As expected by Klin, Klin's original goal was the 7th universe, but now it seems that the 6th universe can also do it. Klin was overjoyed. I've made money again. Bo Galen, please let me get the star maps of the 6th and 7th universes. Klin shouted. Naru faced Bo Galen and said loudly, asterisk 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 asterisk. It's extremely easy. Bo Galen's voice came, and another red light flashed in his eyes. As soon as he finished speaking, Klin felt the entire universe of galaxies outlined in his mind. Each galaxy was dotted with stars, and countless galaxies merged into the flowing Milky Way. Countless stars, each shining point represents a star. In his mind, Klin saw the dim Earth, which seemed as insignificant as dust in the northern Milky Way. It seems that the Earth is really a worthless low-level star, but who could have imagined that the 7th universe in the future would? Is it true that a strong person was cultivated by people on Earth? Klin pulled his gaze upwards, as if looking at the heaven and earth with a magnifying glass. Klin saw an unusually bright planet with a purple halo. Is this the destruction of the god realm? The aura of destruction was really chilling. Huh. Why do you feel like someone is spying on the god of destruction? Weiss was squinting and tasting the food. Suddenly the feeling disappeared again. Hey, forget it, the food on Cross Planet is really delicious. After speaking, Weiss took another big bite and glanced at the place where Beerus slept. This feeling is really amazing, like standing on the roof of the world and looking at the world with a magnifying glass. Klin couldn't help but laugh. There is one last wish, tell me your wish. Bo Galen's old voice came again. My last wish is to gain teleportation. I can move to every corner of the stars I know. Klin said loudly again. Naru, U0026 asterisk 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 asterisk. This wish involves the power of space. I cannot realize it with my own strength. It also depends on your own strength. I can leave the power of space on you, but each use requires your strength. The more power you have, the more power you have. The stronger it is, the farther you can move. On the contrary, you can only move on one planet. A burst of red light flashed. Well, your wish has come true. Goodbye. After saying that, Bo Galen turned into a Dragon Ball and spiraled into the sky, flying towards various places on Namek. 1 year later, that is, 130 Queen Dragon Ball regains her divine power. Klin closed his eyes and took in the space power that Bo Galen had left on him just now. Klin had a feeling that he could reach every place on Namek in an instant. Let's go, Nelu, let's go back. After saying that, Klin stepped forward to grab Nelu, and disappeared in a flash. The elders and gods of Namek were chatting happily. The appearance of Klin and Naru at the same time shocked everyone. However, the great elder smiled slightly and saw the space power emerging from Klin. Nelu was really surprised. He was thousands of miles away just now, but in the blink of an eye, he was at the great elder's residence. Teleportation, Naru murmured. 5 days later, the elders embarked on their return journey. Haha, Tui, Klin couldn't help but swallowed his saliva. He had promised to go back just to see his hometown, but now he wanted to go to their respective villages with the elders. Of course, Klin is still happy in his heart. Nothing major has happened on the earth in the past few years. The effect is the same whether there is a god or not. Moreover, even if the god is there, the effect is still the same. At most, there is one more person to worry about. The gods followed the elders and left, and he also gave the spaceship to the gods, and Nelu no longer fought with him, saying, always be ready to protect the great elders. Klin looked at the Namekian above his head. The exclusive green sky howled loudly. If you want to live a good life, you must have a touch of green above your head. Netizens will not deceive me. Nelu looked at Klin in a daze. Is this Klin's new trick? Then he looked at his green body. In 5 days, Klin was not wasted. Klin used the teleportation of nearby stars to keep moving. The first thing he arrived at was a few companion stars near Namek. The companion stars were fine. Apart from their small size, they were just like a star. A smaller version of Namek. After exploring the companion star, Klin moved toward a farther planet. Klin's target was the farthest planet in this galaxy. The name of the ancient planet was Skolasis, located at the westernmost end of Namek. Klin communicated with the planet in his mind and mobilized his breath to move instantly. In the blink of an eye, Klin came to the Skolasi planet. Phew, he actually spent 1/10 of his breath. The universe is boundless and he wants to. It seems that traveling around the universe is very difficult without hundreds of millions of combat capabilities. It's actually a planet without an atmosphere. Klin used all the energy in his body to protect himself. Klin wouldn't be able to hold on for long. This planet is so desolate. Because there is no protection from the atmosphere, the temperature differences in different areas of the planet are huge. The huge temperature differences cause the pressure gradient force, and the pressure gradient force is the source of the wind. Clint looked at the sandstorms all over the sky. I couldn't help but think of what I learned in my previous life. It should be correct, right? It was so cold. Klin once again used teleportation to return to Namek. Moving in the local galaxy was so laborious, and moving across galaxies required more energy. Klin couldn't help but feel dizzy. To put it bluntly, he was weak. After 5 days of experiments by Klin, it was found that moving within a galaxy consumes less breath, and one's own recovery can catch up with the breath consumption. However, it cannot recover on a planet with an extremely harsh environment. Moving across galaxies consumes more breath. You cannot recover by yourself, you must stop and rest. The Earth is too far away from Namek, so we must find a planet as a stopping point. The stopping point is like a supply port in the previous life. Krillin said that he should take his time before he is familiar with it. It's time to leave, your journey is across the stars and the sea. The energy is not enough again. Klin simply tidied up and then came to the Great Elder's residence. As the child leaving, the Elder said to Klin with a smile on his face. Well, the road to becoming stronger is long and arduous. Klin nodded sternly. Go, child, remember Namek. The Great Elder said tiredly. Klin nodded seriously again. Nelu, goodbye. Klin knows that Nelu wants to fight with him again, but Nelu is a conscientious person, and there is probably no one more important in his life than the Great Elder. Klin stepped forward, gave Nelu a brotherly hug, and said, practice well, and we will fight again next time. After saying that, Klin's figure became blurred and gradually disappeared into the room. When Nelu heard what Klin said, the corners of his mouth raised slightly, and his eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Krillin left Namek and teleported towards the central galaxy. He patted his head on the way and said, I just went to dress 13. I forgot to ask the Great Elder where to stop on the way to the central galaxy. Thanks for watching.